Now we've got three people who are coming on who have been no platformed. So look away if you don't like people who've been no platforms. But our first speaker is Jackie Walker. How are you, Jackie? Sorry to keep you from...
No, it's been a great program, actually. I've loved it. I think it's been really interesting, informative and entertaining. Well done.
Oh, thank you. You've got a platform here if you keep saying stuff like that. What we're doing in this no platforming thing is what I want to know, what it's like to be no platform. How does it actually feel to you when you're told that your voice can't be heard? I mean, you're quite prepared to debate people, aren't you? I mean, it's not as if you're like not willing to debate. How does that work for you?
Well, it's not just a political attack, which it is. It's also an attack on your actual identity. And the worst thing, I think, for somebody like me, and I think this issue is actually more complicated than many people would like to think of it as being, was the way that those on the left responded to that, and the misunderstanding of how you should respond, and the confusion around how we need to respond to these kind of issues. Because it's not as if, the first boycott was actually against the sugar trade, and it was organized, the center of the organization was Liverpool and by women. That was the first boycott. And of course, boycotts are linked to no platforming, in particular now that we have so much social media. So, I mean, for me, it was an act of political and individual destruction. But I could just see the way that this was going to undermine and destroy or help destroy what was happening under the Corbyn movement.
Yeah. So what do you think about people being no platformed, like say fascists? Do you think they should be no platformed?
Like, I'm a really strong believer in the power of dialogue to defeat racism and hatred. I'm also I think we really need to understand why people who are on the right, on the far right, who are Zionists, refuse to go into dialogue, right? It's got nothing to do with moral indignation. It's got everything to do with the fact that if they actually entered into dialogue and had to prove what they were saying by evidence, they would be defeated. So I have a very strong sense that actually freedom of speech is a very powerful tool for the left. However, if you have somebody on the organized far right of organized racism and fascism who actually is advocating violence, actually properly advocating violence, I think there may, and there sometimes is, a point at which we need to consider that. But for example, I think the left have started no platforming people just far too much, and that it plays into the hands of the right.
And there's also this sort of no platforming of people who've been associated with someone who's been no platform. So I could be no platform for talking to you at all here. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's how a witch hunt works. That's how McCarthyism works, because it works through fear. And the fear is, if I support this person, even though I think they're right, it works in two ways. Not only may I become a victim of it myself, but the movement that I support will be undermined. And unfortunately, that's a very convincing argument, even though, in fact, it leads to the ruination of the movement that is actually going on itself. And can I just say something about boycotts and the discussion that was going on about Joni Mitchell and Neil Young? I do think there is a different issue about boycotts. And I do think people like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell have a right to boycott because that is their product. The music is a product of their labor, and everybody has a right to withdraw that. And if people started using my book for purposes I didn't want them to, or in a way that encouraged, say, for example, racism, I would want to stop that. And I think there's a difference between people refusing to buy products, that's a boycott, and no platforming. It is a very strong difference.
Right, yeah. Now I'm going to, Tina's going to come in now. Tina.
Well, you said all the points I was going to make. It's the question of debating with fascists, isn't it? Which I was going to bring up, but I think you've made that point. I would like to share a video, though, of Esther Giles, who has been no platformed by the left, and I think that's quite a big problem. I'm just going to show her. She can't be here, unfortunately. We did invite her because we think it's important to discuss those issues. So I'm going to share that video quickly.
I'm Esther Giles from Bristol, currently a member, but only just, of Bristol North West Labour Party. I'm also treasurer of the Socialist Health Association and do various other things for the left. And I do have experience of no platforming, but that's within the context of a wider blackening of my name and reputation that's taken place over a number of years. And the no platforming really stemmed from all of that wider experience. It began in Bristol in 2018 when I tried to stand as a councillor, and because of my support for a comrade who'd taken part in the debate on gender self-ID, I was branded a transphobe, and people put together a petition to remove me from councillor selection panel, so I was prevented from standing as a councillor. There were various other things that followed from that, because the same people involved in that campaign then continued to pursue me with whatever I wanted to try to do on the left. So, for example, when I stood for Labour Party Treasurer in 2020, again, there was a big campaign, do not vote for Esther, she's a transphobe, and so forth. And there was a lot of attention during my campaign on the things I may or may not have said or done. And this is the thing, a lot of smears aren't really based in reality. They're based on what somebody says about you. And then somebody says about that, something about that. And then somebody said, oh, did you hear about her? Did you know that she was? It is a massive series of Chinese whispers. And then eventually, if people say it often enough, then people just generally believe it's a matter of truth, it's a matter of faith. And then it does become some sort of truth. So all of this culminated when we had the Stop the Labour Lockout event. And at the time, I was in a group called Save Our Socialists. And what we were doing is trying to pull together solidarity for all of the CLP secretaries and chairs and other officers that have been expunged, suspended from Labour, mainly for supporting Jeremy Corbyn, partially for criticising Sir Keir, but always for doing things that certain parts of the Labour Party didn't agree with, not breaking any rules. They didn't actually break any rules. And so Save Our Socialists had a campaign about that. And we were going to take part in the Stop the Labour Lockout event, which is organised by Don't Leave Organise. And I was going to speak on behalf of Save Our Socialists. One of the other speakers on the panel, who was from Liverpool and a mayoral candidate, had heard this Chinese whisper, these terrible things about me. And so she said, I'm not going to speak at an event where that Esther is speaking. So either you ask her to stand down or I'm going to boycott the event. So then, of course, the panel had this terrible dilemma. Either she was going to stand down and potentially take a load of other people with her, or I had to go. So what happened in the end, of course, is that I had to go, and I didn't speak for Save Our Socialists. I did not stand on that platform. And of course, the irony of that, as many people pointed out during the show, and by the way, the show wasn't, it then took place as a webinar where there was no audience participation whatsoever. And everyone was saying, well, where's Esther? And then, of course, the thing that came out of that meeting was, this is a meeting which is objecting to socialists being expunged from the Labour Party. And we're expunging socialists from our meeting. So there's the irony. And the other final thing that I'd like to say is this thing about no platforming of me with nothing whatsoever to do with anything that I was going to say at that event. It was in effect about somebody's perception of my wrong think or wrong speak. So no platforming, in my opinion, is an extremely dangerous thing and something that we need to watch out for. In the same way that we watch out for witch hunts, in the same way that we resist witch hunting, we have to make sure that it doesn't happen. Thank you, comrades.
I think that was a very powerful and very good reminder that what happens if we take a tactic that might, under certain circumstances, I think I'm with you, Jackie, you know, generally we want to debate people. We're socialists. We believe people can change. We can change people's view, otherwise we can give up that fight. So, you know, debating somebody, I mean, like Tommy Robinson, I think you could wipe the floor with him and you could show up what, you know, stupid racist ideas he has. And maybe some of his supporters could be convinced, you know, that he is actually an idiot and nothing more than that. So our ideas are generally stronger. So, but then for the left to pick up this no platforming, I think this is where the real serious harm is being done. And that was Don't Leave Organized. I think they've apologized for it since, but I think that's a lesson we have to learn, don't we? Okay, we have another speaker. Sorry.
Yeah, can I just
come in?
Can I just come in and you know, I think this idea that people want to debate. I mean, the next speaker that we've got he's in Mexico, and he's that keen to debate that he's getting up at 5 a.m. to be here. Heiko, how are you doing?
Good, yeah.
Now, I see you I saw you at the Brighton Labour conference, and you were very keen to debate anyone there. And this no platforming, it's a very frustrating thing, isn't it? If you actually have something to say, as you've been doing at Speaker's Corner every week for years and decades. Is this the first time with what this issue of vaccinations and other things, like lockdown, that you were criticizing lockdown and vaccinations? Is this the first time you've actually been no platformed?
I mean, I did work. I started speaking at Speaker's Corner in 1986, and so we've always had an open and democratic open platform for anybody to get up and speak. And I did work in the underground in East Germany, and so my main focus politically was on challenging what was supposed to be the left wing, the East German state, and its representatives, and their narrative about the truth, which they claim to be the sole and exclusive truth. And that discussion was initially completely banned. I mean, there were literally 200 people involved in the opposition. And from that, on the 7th of October in East Berlin, we shifted the balance of power, and it became the majority were expressing what they thought about what was happening in society. And I mean, I've been prevented from speaking at various meetings. I'm someone who go to a meeting, if I don't like the way it's been stitched up, and quite often meetings are stitched up, in particular, for example, Stop the War Coalition used to do that. You know, they call for motions and debates, and then you go and make moves and motions at the meeting in conformity with everything they'd agreed to. And then they'd suddenly start getting everyone to chant you down and stop you from asking a question or moving a resolution that you've already, you know, presented to the meeting. And so in general, I will intervene in those circumstances because that's my political background. I just don't take any of that stuff. More recently, in relation to the anti-lockdown movement, there's been a generic hatred of anybody involved in such a movement. There's a smear campaign run by the mass media to present anyone who's opposed to the measures taken as some sort of either a plague rat or a far-right activist. And I myself have actually got up at Speaker's Corner when Tommy Robinson came to Speaker's Corner. I got up on my own and stood up against him, speaking against him, offering to debate. The problem was they had quite a large group of quite militant activists who pulled me down from the platform and dragged me away and that sort of thing. A few kicks and punches. That was 2018, but a couple of years in 2020, the same thing occurred at Speaker's Corner, and I got up and spoke. And I was arrested first, and then Tommy Robinson was arrested shortly afterwards. And then this has been a rolling since that first arrest, and then 6 subsequent arrests during the last year or year and a half. There's been a generalized ban on me being able to say things and do things. So, for example, Google through YouTube completely banned me. I can't even look at YouTube under my own name. I'm not even allowed to search for anything.
Wow.
Everything I ever posted, 250 videos over a period of 15 years, was completely removed from YouTube. I was on Twitter for about 2 days, got on Twitter, posted a question posed to Neil Ferguson about what he was up to and so on. And then I was banned from Twitter for posting that. There was nothing even against their regulations involved in that. In the case of Google, I went to Google headquarters and I went inside the building and made a speech inside the building complaining about their ban. And they wrote to me that evening, so we're reaching out to you because you caused a protest at Google headquarters. And then, but then they decided they'll double down and prevent me from speaking. And at the Labour Party conference, I mean, at the World Transformed, I was beaten up twice this year for asking a question. And it was a stitch up. Again, it was this sort of situation where they said, anyone want to ask anything? So you stand up with your hand up. The first person, and I know, because in meetings, they're generally not the first person to put their hand up. So if you stand up and put your hand up, then it's pretty difficult to ignore you. And but they purposefully avoided myself. And then when they then turned around and said, oh, right, as the chair, I'm going to decide that only people of colour and young people could speak. So specifically excluding me. And then and I just said, well, I just said the question anyway. And then they just grabbed me, threw me out of the meeting and punched me in the face. I mean, this is a World Transform meeting. What sort of psychology is developing that people think that type of behavior is acceptable? Because on the left, we're notorious for being the ones who say you should be able to interrupt a meeting and, cause a protest and, extinction is fine, all that sort of stuff.
Can I just ask a question? Because we did a survey as well on this, but do you think your profile has got bigger because of your being no platforms than it was? I mean, I think lots of people know who you are. Before we spoke on this show about a year and a half ago, and you were just doing Speaker's Corner, and since then I think you're becoming a bit of a celebrity, aren't you, because you're being beaten up on no platforms?
Well, hopefully not because of the beatings.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know, because obviously.
So what I mean is, does it work? Does it actually work? I mean, do you think your ideas that you've come out with have been silenced, or do you think it's actually made what you're saying more known?
I mean, certainly the ban on YouTube is not at all beneficial because it prevents you from getting stuff out. Last couple of days, the main channel that I've done stuff on YouTube, on Facebook, that had about 17,000 subscribers, that's been banned the last 3 days. So, if they're constantly seeking to restrict, what's happening at the moment, in my opinion, is the entire narrative in relation to the forbidden subject is being retracted. And as they retract that narrative and withdraw different components of the arguments that they put forward as gospel, as they withdraw all of them, they have to attack those people who pointed that out in the first place. And therefore, what's happening is is that they are moving against people even more at the moment, in advance of them retracting the story and presenting the story that we presented over the last year and a half as their story. So that's like, for example, last week's protest where NHS staff turned up. That wasn't an NHS protest. It was a protest by people who have been against what's been happening. And the NHS workers joined in. And then the news presented that as an NHS protest because it was so significant that it was not possible for them to present it another way. So we really do live in an Orwellian world now.
Can I say something on this quickly? Because I did run into Heiko at a protest we organized with Labour Against the Witch Hunt outside the NEC, Labour Party NEC, July 20th, to protest against prescriptions. And you and your friends came along towards the end and you tried to take the microphone off us and you tried to take over the protest as we saw it. I don't think that's really the same thing as no platforming. And you're saying the same, almost like, that's what happened at World Transform. Not no platforming means I fight for your right to talk what I think is mostly nonsense, to be honest. But I don't have to invite you to our meeting. So if we put on a meeting on prescriptions, then that's our meeting. We don't have to let you speak. We didn't deny you free speech. This was our protest and we wanted to bring it to a good end with Jackie's and others there to speak. So, there is a difference. So I'm not quite sure we're talking about the same thing here.
I mean, I purposely avoided that. There is a video of that. Anyone wants to see what happened, they can see it. I mean, it was a meeting against witch hunts.
Prescriptions, yeah.
Prescriptions. There was an open platform for people to get up and ask and make statements.
Nope. We had a list of speakers. We wanted to bring the demo to a halt. You tried to get the microphone up.
The guy got up before me, who was not on the list, and got up and spoke. I'd spoken to him before he got up and spoke, so I know that's a fact. And I mean, I just don't want to have a little petty debate about this right now.
Can I just can we move on a bit? I mean, because it's a big issue. We don't want to get caught in one.
Exactly.
One thing. Bernard Regan wrote in with the survey and wished to speak. Bernard, are you?
Yeah, well, just to say that I very much agreed with what Jackie and Tina and Esther were saying earlier, so I don't want to repeat what they have said, but I think in respect of the most recent kind of exchange that has taken place, I think if people are organizing a meeting and putting together a platform, they have a right to decide who speaks from that platform. So I don't think that's a denial of freedom of speech. People can organize their own platform or seek to intervene elsewhere. But when a meeting is constructed for a particular purpose, I think it's legitimate that the people organizing it have a right to define who should be contributors to that. I agree with with what Jackie and Tina and Esther said particularly, and just to say briefly, Crispin, maybe it's been done, but it may be that this platform could become a model for having those debates with people, particularly, it seems to me, around the questions of sex and gender, where there is some of the sharpest exchanges have taken place, and where the issue of no platforming has become a really major concern. And there are areas where I know that people have tried to no platform people in areas where the debate is nothing to do with the issue of sex and gender. It's to do with cuts that were taking place in a local council, for example. Somebody was defined as being a TERF, and it was argued that they shouldn't have any right to contribute in the course of that. And I think that is extremely dangerous. I think it's important for us to reclaim the issue of freedom of speech as a left issue. It's a left issue, and I think we don't assert this strongly enough. We shouldn't let the likes of Toby Young and other people try to, colonize it and claim it as being their right. Historically, it's the left that has faced banning of prescriptions and denial of rights by the state, and you can see that in all the legislation. Like the police and criminal, bill, like the attempts to limit the rights to demonstration and so on and so forth. And those are the offensives that we've faced. And I think we should be very strong on that. In terms of inside the left, I think there is a need to debate. I think there are 3 examples of that recently that have been kind of exemplify the need. One is obviously that one of the issues we've been talking about, that of Palestine and the issue of the IHRA, and the need to be clear that actually to discuss the character of the Israeli state is not to be anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish. It's a legitimate political debate to use criteria that would apply to other countries in terms of defining their character, in terms of analyzing what's the nature of the state of Israel and its relationship to the Palestinians. And, in that respect, I regard Britain as a racist state as well. It's not that Israel is being singled out. It's that, it's in this instance, its actions have direct consequences for the lives of the Palestinian people. On the question of sex and gender, I've mentioned that as a debate. Another one, which is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, is the issue of Brexit, where people who supported Brexit were described as racist by some, when in actual fact, if you looked at the reality of the European Union, we've seen tens, if not hundreds of thousands of migrants drowning in the Mediterranean as a consequence of the racist policies of the European Union. We've seen people held up on the Polish border and so on. And I think that some of these issues have been reduced and simplified in a crude way, which has actually prevented us on the left having a thorough discussion in order to construct unity and action to fight for the ideals and principles that people hold dear. And I think we have to be the champions of freedom of speech. We have to be the ones who are saying it's the state that is repressing. And, today is the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. You can see what the consequences are of the denial of the right to freedom of speech in the tragic murders of people that took place in Derry 50 years ago. So, we should be the ones who are championing freedom of speech.
Well, thank you, Bernard. Now, Susan McCrow Hill has written in as well to ask to speak. Susan.
3 things that I'm going to talk about. I'm against no platforming because I think it infantilizes us. It treats us as children who have to be protected from harm. It treats us as, I keep getting messages that say, start your video and unmute and so on. I'm sorry, but it treats us as children and it stops us from debating properly. It's narrowing the debate to the acceptable, and then it moves the Overton window. We've always had people who are no platformed. The establishment routinely invites those people it regards as acceptable to talk, and it routinely chooses not to invite the views of people that it doesn't want to hear. But it lacks respect, and that's not the respect that it lacks for the establishment, it's the respect it lacks for the facts, for the people who have actually taken the trouble to find the real facts, as opposed to all the fake news that we constantly get fed, the whitewash and the experiences of people. And it most of all denies the experience of victims to actually talk about their experiences. So I'm totally against no platforming. But I also think that it's social justice. By no platforming, we are denying certain people their right to be heard. That doesn't mean that we have to give equal voice to people who are peddling lies or one-sided in their experience. It simply means that we need to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard and then debated, and then people can make up their own opinion. We're not children, and social media should be for people who are adults. We have destroyed our political awareness by trying to be not offensive to people. And it's a waste of time. It's why Brexit happened, because it just ended up as a party political football to be kicked around on 2 sides instead of people really knowing what was going on. And it's tragic. But no witch hunts. But above all, see people as people first.
Well, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Now, Palash he replied to the survey. But what would you like to add to what's been said?
Well, it's very refreshing that this is a left forum that's kind of by default really libertarian on the questions of free speech, because I find too often on the left there isn't enough of that attitude. And as one of the last contributors said, we need to reclaim freedom of speech as a left issue, and urgently so. I guess I wonder, with regard to, I instinctivly feel that with regard to countering bigotry, rather as Jackie Walker said, there's no substitute for dialogue. What I wonder though is, what about, and this is an open question really for the panelists, what about situations where you feel that there's a direct physical threat from, say, goons accompanying Tommy Robinson or whatever to a student union meeting or whatever it might be? Is that a legitimate, perhaps the only legitimate reason for no platforming, or to physically protect members of a community and to give them a sense of security and safety?
Jackie, do you want to come in on that?
I mean, I thought I'd made that clear. I think for me, that is the bottom line. That is the bottom line. And I think as socialists, we absolutely need to have this as part of our, if you like, our identity. Now, I don't agree with what Heiko says at all on immunization, but I think he should be heard. And it's the same way as when I was on a platform with Piers Corbyn, and he was spouting just total drivel about climate change. And on the other side, there was me, there was Piers Corbyn. On the other side, there was actually an academic who dealt with climate. And what happened, and this was in front of a crowd, the climate scientist totally demolished him in a very gentle and well thought out manner. Anybody who was there and listened to that would know which side they were on. And that's what, as socialists, we do. We demolish the argument by reason, by evidence, through an understanding of history. But unless what we're talking is actual existential threats, and I'm not talking about the garbage that we've been told, you know, is an existential threat. Unless it's that, then we debate and we engage. And yes, with racists too. I've done it. That was my job. And it was also my activism. And I have to tell you, that is how you change racists. You don't change them by refusing to engage with them. Yeah. You do that to protect yourself physically. You only change racists by engaging with them.
Well, thank you. I'm getting nudged to sort of speed things up here because we've gone over time. But Tina, before we do that, I mean, Tina, you can come back in. Can we get Tina and Heiko to be friends again, do you think, on this show?
There's no need. As I say, I'd fight for his right to, you know, speak anytime, to the death, perhaps even. But he doesn't need to come and disturb our meetings. That was my.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we can sort that out. But if we got those graphs, because we did a survey of the subscribers to this show, and these are the results of the survey. Do you think no platform is a threat to freedom of speech? Yes, 53%. No, 30%. And other 17%. So slight majority think it's a threat to freedom of speech.
Quite a lot though who don't think so. That's.
Yeah, well, but it's still. You know, I mean, it seems like it's not that popular. No platforming in that way. What's the next one is? Does no platforming give people more publicity than they would have had? Yes, nearly 50%, 47%. No, 26%. Other, 27%. So,
isn't it making martyrs? I think is a real problem.
It might make people more known and
Yep.
Their ideas more common than actually letting them speak. So it's not many people are in favour of no platforming, but there's still a significant number who are. I think we should bring in one more speaker. Is that okay with you, Tina?
All right then.
And then maybe Jackie and Heiko, because Heiko is up at 5 o'clock, and I think he deserves to come back on. Is Charlotte Peters Rock? Are you there, Charlotte?
Yeah. Yeah, what I intend to say now is totally different to where I started, and it is to do with the fact that we've done a full run round of the no platforming, but what we're missing is this. Right through the 19th century, people in this country were marching from starvation, from lack of work. They were no platformed. They were complaining about being no platformed. They didn't have the vote. Now we've got it. What we have is the sort of threat that's come from, certainly not from out of any religion. Religion's being used to mask what's happening, and it's being used against those people who are religious, in fact, rather than the ones who just make claims. And what it is an assault that is ongoing, and it's from the far right. And at the moment, we're being assaulted by our own government as well. And as a UK, we and our government, rather than us particularly, is solely responsible for the shambles that was spoken of earlier by Shahad about what's happening in Palestine. The British Empire was a disgusting assault on the rest of the world, as well as on its own people. The idea of no platforming, which has come up very strongly on the sidebar over the last half hour or so against Esther, is again another attempt to silence people when there is no right to do that. Human beings come both exceptionally male, exceptionally female, and all stages in between, whether we like it or not, they always have. This idea that by saying one thing, you're assaulting people in the middle who are, frankly, in a great deal of difficulty with the way other people treat them. And this has always been the case. And maybe it's worse now because you can change the way you were more readily, and because it's all out in the public sphere. But the idea of no platforming comes because I don't like what you're saying. Therefore, you have no right to say it. Mm-hmm. This is ridiculous. What used to happen, and really should come back strongly, especially from the left, who at the moment, it seems, are exhibiting a form of Stockholm syndrome, where they're trying to say, yeah, no platforming is fine. Yeah, you should all keep quiet because those people over there on the right say you should all keep quiet. No, you should all be out debating. And where you have people who come out as thugs, as we've just heard about Tommy Robinson and mob, and we know happens from the far right in Labour at the moment, there must be other people who will stand, who will not witter their way into a corner and say, well, it's not me, is it? So it's all right. You know, let's have a go at Esther Giles. Let's have a go at Jackie. Go on, because they're already having a go at her. So we might as well just continue it. The whole idea of no platforming is ridiculous, and we must get it out into the open. We must refuse to comply with it. We must certainly refuse to comply with the fact that a university, several universities from what I can hear, have already tried to no platform because somebody else is insisting they should. It's disgusting, and particularly where people like Shahad has been faced with that. Listen to the way she's talking. Listen to her experience. If people can't stand up with somebody like that, what's the point of us? No platforming is ridiculous. Right, I'll shut up now. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Charlotte. Now, Jackie, Heiko, do you want to speak first and then we'll finish with Jackie?
Yeah. Rosa Luxemburg once said, freedom is always and only the freedom for those who think differently to you. And that is a fundamental principle that was actually raised as one of the sort of slogans of the revolution in 1989 in East Germany. And it's one that I hold dear to. And you know, I mean, if you're going to challenge something, there are times when the majority of people that you maybe have got association with may have a different opinion than you. And they may not like the fact that you're putting forward a different point of view. But it's precisely at those times that when you feel that, oh no, everyone's against me and I shouldn't say this, I want to say it, but I shouldn't say it. That's exactly when you should get up and say it. So that's my attitude towards free speech. It's at a time when people think nothing should be said about this. This subject is untouchable. That I think you should. And someone, for example, today I was in discussions with someone about my intervention at the Sarah Everard event. Someone called Andrew Coates attacked me and called me right wing for trying to cause trouble and hijack the event, as the newspaper said. And I'm proud of what I did at that event, because although I was booed down and chanted down at the beginning of that event, by the end of the event, I was standing alongside the people from Sisters Uncut and so on, leading the chant that led to, I mean, it wasn't just me, but that event broke the dam and opened the way to the end of all the restrictions on protests and demonstrations. And so you have to sometimes stand up, even though you're completely unpopular in what you say, and say what you think. And okay, then I'm open to debate all those things. If someone thinks I'm wrong, go ahead, say what's wrong, no problem. But I don't like this sort of sniping about, oh, you did this, you did that, that's just water for ducks back for me, to be honest with you. And I think that's how people need to approach these things.
Thank you, Heiko. I hope we can. I think we can find more love on the show next time you're on. Thank you. And Jackie, what do you think? Most people don't seem to think no platforming is a good idea. I mean, hardly anyone has said it is. So why does it continue? It just seems like everyone who agrees with no platforming doesn't say it.
Well, I'm going to just say that, you see, I don't agree with you. I think the fact that so many people who answered that survey don't see a problem with no platforming just shows you how much education we need to do, because this is a basic political foundation of the left. And instead of having this discussion, we have people, I'm sorry, on the chat talking about trans. We weren't talking about trans. We're talking about no platforming and what no platforming does to our movement. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm going to correct something someone said here. Science is not just a matter of opinion. It's a matter of evidence. And when you have people saying there isn't global warming, right? And other people saying there is, and both sides getting equal amount of exposure, when 95% of scientists say there is global warming, we do not give the same acceptance to people who say there's not. And I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just how I see the vaccination debate. I look at the science, and I look at the scientists I know who I trust. I think you've got a perfect right to say whatever you like, but we need to get back to the fact that it's evidence that's not important, not personal opinion. I just want to end with this. Until the left actually rejects this no platforming of socialist comrades, even those that we disagree with, we will never be able to unify decently.